Mr. Rubin is an expert in Middle Eastern and Iranian affairs with field experience from Iraq to Washington and has taught at top US institutions. He's also a prolific author with over 3,000 published articles. At this conference, he brings a unique geopolitical perspective to the threats facing Armenian heritage in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. Please.
Thank you, Santi.
Thank you so much for your time with us. You're extremely busy traveling the world, but it's also very important to have this interaction with our audience, especially young people that are following us from different regions of the world. Shall we go directly to the content? You delivered a very deep keynote this morning. You have spoken about shifting power dynamics in the South Caucasus. From your perspective, what are the key geopolitical forces currently shaping the region? Are you able to share a frame and some information around that? And how do they directly or indirectly endanger the preservation of Armenian heritage at different levels?
Well, certainly it comes down to ideology. Russia has traditionally been wary whenever any of the South Caucasian states, Azerbaijan, Armenia, or Georgia, have turned towards democracy and has sought to punish each of those three countries at various times. Most recently, Armenia, which has become much more democratic and westward leaning since 2018. But then there's also the ideology that Turkey is espousing, that Ilham Aliyev in Azerbaijan is espousing. Look, here's the takeaway. We can look at this through the lens of grievance and say, oh, it's all about a land dispute. But the fact that Nagorno-Karabakh is now wholly under the control of Azerbaijan, and yet the conflict continues, show that this has never been solely about a land dispute. It's about ideology. And if we don't confront this head on, then we risk actually having the continuation of the Armenian genocide version 2.0.
Thank you. And how do you see the disconnect or alignment between, I would say, international diplomacy and what communities actually in Artsakh are actually facing right now? You have a very clear understanding of both levels, regionally, globally, in terms of law and policy making, but also on the ground realities. What is your insight on that?
I mean, I had a trial by fire because my first trip to the region was actually to Artsakh just about 2 weeks after the guns fell silent after the 44-day war. And then, of course, I've tried to go back to Armenia several times since, twice a year or so, and I've also been privileged to travel to Azerbaijan and to Turkey. Diplomatically, there's a lot going on. And it's important, first of all, that Armenians and those who value religious liberty don't just advocate to each other, but to highlight in the United States, in Paris, in London, the national security implications of religious freedom. Because really, we can put lipstick on a pig, but you really know that a regime such as Azerbaijan's or Turkey's has turned the corner and are sincere when they start respecting religious liberty. Unfortunately, neither Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey nor Ilham Aliyev yet have reached that metric. And when it comes, as you asked before, to the cultural heritage, the way this is all linked, you know that ultimately there's going to be peace when the people of Azerbaijan and the people of Turkey are at peace, not only with their neighbors, but themselves. When you have an ideology which professes eradication of cultural heritage, for example, the destruction of the cemetery at Jolfa, what you have is an attempt to erase any reality of the past so that you can construct a new false narrative for generations to come. That's why it's so important to confront this now, because if we allow the destruction of cultural heritage, what you're basically doing is greenlighting further aggression for decades, generations to come.
Thank you. And what is your message? What we have here is this feeling that we are reaching a kind of end of politics, as if the international law is not applicable anymore. What is it that you would like to say to the people of Armenia, first of all? And secondly, to the international community, NGOs and international bodies in general. This is an international law case. People in Armenia feel alone. What is the message in this dual direction, I would say?
International law has always been a work in progress. But professionally, I'm a historian. And when you're a historian, you're trained to look not just at the here and now, but a broad expanse of time. And when I look at what the Armenians have achieved, frankly, the Armenians, more than any other country in the region, have established a structure. Armenian culture, Armenian politics aren't built around a single person. The same can't be said for Turkey or Azerbaijan, the countries that most endanger religious liberty, because their dictators have systematically sought to undo any democratic checks and balances. Now, as I said at the conference, Santi, every Democrat wakes up and knows when his or her term in office is over. But every dictator has to wake up knowing that today could be their last day. And when Recep Tayyip Erdogan goes or Ilham Aliyev goes, it's going to be very, very difficult for Turkey and Azerbaijan to continue as they are now, simply because there is no structure remaining. There will be a vacuum. And that's why ultimately I think that the forces of religious freedom and of Armenian democracy and justice are going to prevail, even if in the short term things look dark indeed.
This is a message of hope that is really strong. And again, a last question, since many young researchers are following us from around the world, let's say that we have colleagues that would like to dive deeper, I would say, into the content around the topic of Armenia in general, historically, but also from an international affairs perspective. What would you propose to them?
Well, look, historically, there's no better resource than the Armenian Genocide Museum, which has documents and so forth online. But it's not just about the Armenian Genocide Museum, and Armenia goes much beyond. There are any numbers of, in the United States, diplomatic documents in a collection called the Foreign Relations of the United States, which after a 20-year interval declassify all these documents. And today, look, the positive of globalization is you can read Turkish newspapers, you can read Azerbaijani news sites, you can read Armenian press and so forth. So we're being deluged by a wealth of information, and it's important to actually start to digest that. And ultimately, we need more people to do it, not just Armenians, not just people who put religious freedom as their main issue, but more broadly, this is a strategy issue. This is an economy issue. This is a legal issue, as you've said. We have so many different issues which are coming together, and it's important that we have as many people from the younger generation as possible to help us sort them all out.
Thank you. Which means that you also see specific space for faith-based organizations to interact.
Absolutely. Look, and the reason why, even though I work at a Defense and National Security Institute, the reason why I think the faith-based institutes are so important is because that really is the metric. Whether it's in North Korea, whether it's in China, whether it's in Cuba or Venezuela or where have you, the fact of the matter is you don't have diplomatic solutions until you have you don't have rogue leaders coming in from the cold until they start embracing religious freedom. That is the constant metric across geography and across history that shows sincerity and success of diplomacy. And that's why it's so important for faith-based leaders and faith-based activists to hold diplomats to account.
This is actually defining the framework for faith-based organizations globally nowadays. Thank you so very much for your insights. We're really grateful for taking the time.
Thank you.
And all the best as you continue your service.
Thank you so much.